Let the weight behind your eyes settle a little deeper now, as if the room around you has grown softer and farther away. There is nothing to follow and nothing to solve. Only the slow drift of a cold night settling in around something much older than your worries. If this quiet voice helps you find that deep, dark rest, you are welcome to subscribe or like the video, but only if it feels right to you. There is no need to move or decide right now. In the long dark before dawn, when the rest of the castle keep still breathes in heavy sleep, the kitchen is already a low ache of activity. Nobody wakes the cooks with a shout. They wake themselves, pulled from thin pallets in the corner of the same stone room where they worked until their hands went numb the night before. The air is cold enough to see your own breath, and the only light comes from a single iron lamp that throws a wobbling orange smear across the ceiling. You can hear the scrape of a wooden stool, the soft thump of bare feet on packed earth, and the first yawn that sounds more like a groan. This is not a cheerful place. It never was. The kitchen of a medieval household, even a wealthy one, is a cave of necessity. Thick walls of limestone or chalk keep the heat in and the light out. The ceiling is low and black with smoke, because the smoke has nowhere else to go except up and out through a louver in the roof, and half the time the wind pushes it back down again. So the cooks work with stinging eyes and wet coughs, year in and year out, and they stop noticing the sting after a while. That is the trick of survival in here. You stop noticing things. By the time the first rooster clears its throat somewhere in the yard, the great hearth is already awake. Not lit fresh each morning, because a proper kitchen hearth never goes cold. The night crew, if you can call two exhausted boys a crew, kept the embers alive under a mound of ash. Now the head cook, a woman named Agatha who has been doing this since she was small enough to climb into the bread oven to scrub it out, rakes the ash back with a long iron hook. Coals glow beneath like the eyes of something sleeping. She adds kindling, thin sticks of beechwood that snap and curl into flame, then larger logs, then the really big stuff, chunks of oak that will burn for hours without asking for attention. The fire yawns and stretches and begins to eat. Agatha does not smile at the fire. She never smiles at anything in the morning. But her shoulders drop a half-inch, because heat is the only currency that matters in here, and now there will be heat. The first task of the day is not cooking. It is fetching. Two kitchen boys, maybe 12 years old, maybe younger, pull on rough wool tunics and step out into the yard. The grass is wet with dew and cold enough to make their toes curl. One goes to the well with two wooden buckets on a yoke across his shoulders. The other walks toward the small shed where the salted pork hangs from hooks, along with sides of bacon and a whole ham that has been curing since autumn. The well boy lowers the bucket hand over hand, feeling the rope scrape against his palms, and listens to the splash far below. He hauls it up slowly because a fast rope burns. Back in the kitchen, he pours the water into a massive iron cauldron that hangs from a chain over the fire, and the cold water seems to sigh when it hits the black iron. The pork boy brings in a slab of bacon streaked with white fat and a gray-green rind. He sets it on the heavy wooden table that dominates the center of the room, a table scarred by 1,000 cleaver blows, black in the grain from old blood and old wine. Then comes the bread. Every medieval kitchen worth its salt bakes its own daily bread, and this one is no different. The bread dough was set to rise the night before, a slack, alive mass in a large earthenware crock covered with a damp linen cloth. Agatha peels back the cloth and looks at it the way a general looks at a map. She pushes a finger into the dough, and the indentation stays. Good. It is ready. She turns the dough out onto a floured board and begins to knead it again, a slow, rhythmic press and fold that she could do in her sleep. Her arms are thick from years of this, ropey veins standing out when she works. She divides the dough into loaves, round, flat, more like large biscuits than what you would call a loaf today, and sets them on a wooden peel dusted with bran. The bread oven is separate from the hearth. It is a beehive-shaped vault of brick at the back of the kitchen, and it has its own fire. A boy has already been feeding that fire for an hour, getting the bricks hot enough to turn white. When the oven is ready, Agatha rakes out the burning logs and the ashes, leaving only radiant heat trapped in the stone. Then she slides the loaves in on the long peel, 6 of them at a time, and seals the oven door with a wet rag. The bread will bake in the falling heat, and by midday it will be done. Crust hard enough to crack a tooth, crumb dense and chewy, nothing like the soft stuff you might know. It is food for holding, for soaking, for surviving. By now the rest of the household is starting to stir, but the kitchen does not care about their stirring. The kitchen has its own rhythm. Agatha sends another boy to the garden to pull leeks and onions and a few tired cabbages that have been in storage since Michaelmas. The garden is a walled patch behind the kitchen, muddy this time of year, with brown stalks poking up through the wet earth. The boy pulls the vegetables by the handful, shaking off the clods of dirt, and carries them back in his apron. He sits on a low stool near the door and begins to trim the roots and peel the papery skins off the onions, and his eyes water, but he does not wipe them because his hands are dirty, so he just blinks and keeps going. These are the hours of preparation. The long, slow morning when nothing is served yet but everything is becoming. The cauldron of water over the main fire begins to shudder with small bubbles. Agatha tosses in a handful of salt from a ceramic pot, then the slab of bacon in one piece, then the leeks chopped into fat rounds, the onions quartered, the cabbage shredded into ribbons. She adds a bundle of dried herbs, thyme, savory, a little sage, tied together with kitchen twine. The pot will simmer all day, deepening by the hour, and by evening it will become pottage, the one dish that feeds everyone from the lord in the hall to the lowest scullion in the corner. But pottage is not the only thing happening. The kitchen is always doing 3 things at once. On the other side of the hearth, a spit is being loaded. A boy has threaded 6 pigeons onto the iron rod, each one trussed with its legs tucked under and its wings folded flat. The spit is mounted on 2 iron brackets and a small dog in a hamster wheel-like contraption. A turnspit dog, bred for nothing else, trots in place to make the spit rotate. The dog is skinny and its eyes are old, but it knows the rhythm. Step, step, step. The spit turns, the pigeons rotate past the flames. A pan sits underneath to catch the drippings, which will be used later for basting or for mixing into the pottage or for sopping up with bread. Agatha's second in command is a man named Robin, maybe 30 years old, maybe 40. Hard to tell with cooks. His face is wind-burned and spattered with old burn scars on his forearms. He is in charge of the griddle, a flat slab of iron set over its own small fire. On the griddle, he is making something called a frumenty, which is cracked wheat boiled in almond milk or cow's milk if they have it, sweetened with a little honey and spiced with cinnamon and ginger. It is a breakfast dish for the Lord's table, soft and warm and pale, and Robin stirs it with a wooden paddle for what feels like hours, scraping the bottom so it does not catch, watching the grains plump and soften. He tastes it from the spoon, then adds a pinch more salt. He does not taste it again. He already knows. The light in the kitchen changes slowly. The smoke hole in the roof lets in a gray column of morning sky, and dust motes float in it like tiny boats. The firelight and the daylight mix into something the color of old bone. You can hear everything if you stop and listen. The hiss of fat hitting the coals, the clunk of the wooden ladle against the cauldron, the soft panting of the turnspit dog, the scrape of the boy's knife against a carrot that has gone a little soft at the ends. Nobody speaks much. There is nothing to say. The work talks for itself. A shadow falls across the doorway. It is the chamberlain, a thin man in a long tunic, here to check on the morning's progress. He does not come inside. The smoke would ruin his clothes, he says, but he stands at the threshold and asks Agatha about the midday meal. There will be guests. A minor baron passing through with his retinue. 6 extra mouths, maybe 8. Agatha nods once. She does not look up from the dough she is shaping into small rolls for the steward's table. She says, "I'll stretch the pottage with more barley and kill another hen." The chamberlain hesitates, then nods and leaves. He knows better than to argue with a cook who has a cleaver in her belt. The morning wears on like a horse pulling a cart up a long hill. Slow, steady. Inevitable. The pigeons on the spit have turned from pale to gold to a deep brown, their skin crisping and cracking. The dog keeps trotting. The frumenty is done and is moved to a cool corner to wait. The bread comes out of the oven, and the smell of it, that dark, toasted, yeasty smell, fills the kitchen for a few minutes before the smoke eats it again. Agatha pulls one loaf out and breaks it open. Steam rises. She chews a small piece, then nods and hands the rest to the smallest boy, who eats it standing up, still dirty-fingered, because nobody has time to sit. This is the heart of it. This is the medieval kitchen at the quiet pivot of the morning. Not a place of romance or feasting, but a place of management, of fuel and water and time, of knowing how many leeks to chop, how long the fire will last, how much salt is left in the pot, of doing the same thing every day because the people in the hall will be hungry every day, and the sun will go down every day, and the cold will come back every night. The cooks do not think about legacy or art. They think about the next hour, and the hour after that, and the ache in their lower backs, and whether the well boy remembered to bring enough wood. The second cauldron, the smaller one, is hung over a secondary fire for a vegetable broth. This one is for the lower tables, the servants and the guards and anyone else who does not rate pork. It has only the cabbage and the leeks and a handful of dried peas that have been soaking since last night. The peas are like little green stones until they're not, until the hot water works its way into them and they soften and swell and give up their pale starch. The broth turns cloudy and thin. It will be served with a piece of yesterday's bread floating in it, and that will be a meal. A meal that thousands of people in this century will eat twice a day for their entire lives without ever complaining. Because complaining takes energy and they need all their energy for staying alive. Robin wipes his hands on a rag tucked into his belt and goes outside to check the beehives. The kitchen keeps 3 skep hives at the edge of the garden, and the bees are sluggish this late in the season, clustered together against the cold. He does not take honey today, it is too early and the bees need it for winter, but he looks at them anyway, the way you look at a bank account when you are not sure you can make it to payday. He crouches down and watches the few bees that drift out into the cold air, then turn around and go back inside. That is the whole of beekeeping in November. Watching them decide not to bother. Back in the kitchen, Agatha is dealing with a problem. The well boy brought up a bucket of something that looks like water but smells like mud. It happens sometimes when the water table drops or a dead animal gets into the well. She sniffs it, frowns, and pours it out the door without a word. The boy goes back to the well with a cloth to tie over the bucket next time. It will not keep out the smell, but it might catch the biggest chunks. They will use the water anyway because there is no other water, and boiling kills most of what can kill you. Most. Not all. But most. The sun is properly up now. A low winter sun that barely clears the top of the outer wall. It throws a thin line of light across the kitchen floor, and in that line you can see every crumb, every dropped herb, every smear of old fat ground into the dirt. The floor is packed earth, swept sometimes but never scrubbed, and it has absorbed so much spilled food over the years that it has become something like asphalt. Hard, black, slightly greasy to the touch. Moss grows in the corners where the roof leaks. Nobody minds the moss. It is green and there is not much green in here. The first meal of the day is not breakfast the way you know it. It is a small meal called a prandium eaten around mid-morning, and it is mostly for the workers. Agatha pulls the bread out again, slices it thick, and slathers each piece with dripping, the rendered fat saved from yesterday's roast. The boys take their bread outside and eat it standing in the yard, looking at nothing. Robin drinks a cup of small beer, which is weak and sour and safer than the well water. Agatha drinks nothing. She just stands by the fire with her arms crossed, watching the pottage bubble, and her face is as calm and empty as a stone. By now, the kitchen has reached a kind of plateau. The hard part of the morning is over. The fires are stable. The food is progressing. The next few hours will be a long, patient simmer, a holding pattern until the midday dinner, the main meal of the day. This is when the kitchen feels most like a sleeping animal, warm, breathing slow, waiting. The turnspit dog has been replaced by a boy who turns the spit by hand, and the dog lies in a corner with its nose on its paws, dreaming of whatever dogs dream about in the 14th century. Probably running, probably rabbits, probably a warm hearth with no smoke. Agatha finally sits down for a moment. She lowers herself onto an upturned barrel near the fire, and the heat hits her back, and her eyes close for 30 seconds. Not sleeping, just resting the weight of her eyelids. Then the chamberlain's boy comes in with a message. The Lord wants capons, not pigeons. And she opens her eyes and stands up and walks to the cage where 3 capons are pecking at scattered grain. She picks one by the neck and carries it to the table, and the sound of the axe is quick and clean and final. The kitchen does not stop for death. The kitchen is death, repackaged as heat and served in a bowl. The midday dinner is the anchor of the day, the meal that everything before it has been building toward and everything after it will have to clean up. In the hall upstairs, the lord and his lady will sit at the high table on a raised dais, and their guests will sit below them on benches, and the servants will rush back and forth with platters and pitchers and towels. But down here in the kitchen, the dinner is just a matter of logistics. The pottage has thickened. The pigeons have come off the spit and are resting on a wooden platter, their small legs pointing upward like tiny brown boats. The frumenty sits in a covered bowl. The capons, the late addition, are now roasting on a second spit because the first one was already occupied, and the boy turning that spit is the same boy who was turning the pigeons, and his arms are starting to shake. Agatha moves through it all like a slow current. She does not rush. Rushing breaks things, spills things, burns things. She lifts the lid of the pottage and stirs it once, slowly, from the bottom. The wooden spoon brings up a chunk of bacon, a leek ring, a pale barley grain. She lets it fall back in. She adds a splash of vinegar from a small earthenware jug, just enough to cut the fat, and the pottage seems to settle deeper into itself, as if it has been waiting for that vinegar its whole life. The platters are lined up on the table. Wooden trenchers for the lower tables. Stale bread that has gone hard, used as plates, later eaten or given to the poor. For the high table, actual pottery plates, glazed green and yellow, with a rim to hold the juices. Agatha does not care about the plates. Plates are the concern of the steward and the serving staff. Her concern is the food on the plates, and whether it will be hot enough by the time it reaches the hall. The kitchen is on the ground floor. The hall is 1 floor up. The stairs are narrow and dark, and the servers have to walk slowly or they will trip. And if they walk slowly, the food cools. And if the food cools, the lord will complain. And if the lord complains, the steward will come down and speak sharply to Agatha. And Agatha will stand there with her arms crossed and say nothing, because there is nothing to say. The food is hot when it leaves the kitchen. What happens on the stairs is not her problem. But it is her problem because everything is her problem. She adds a handful of fresh herbs to the top of the pottage right before it is carried up. Parsley, a little mint, some chopped chives, because the bright green against the dark broth makes it look fresher than it is, and that matters. The eye eats first. Even in the 14th century, the eye eats first. 20 minutes before the call to dinner, the kitchen becomes a different kind of place. The holding pattern ends. The fires are stoked high, and the heat in the room doubles. The turnspit dog wakes up and barks once, then stops. The smallest boy is sent to the buttery for a pitcher of wine for the high table, and he runs because he knows the butler hates to be asked twice. Robin carves the pigeons into halves with a single swift motion of his knife. Each bird split down the breastbone, arranged on the platter with the cut sides down so they look whole. The capons are lifted off the second spit and set on their own platter. Their skin so dark it is almost black, the fat still bubbling in little pits across the surface. Agatha pours a sauce over them. A thin sauce made from the drippings, a little wine, some ginger and breadcrumbs to thicken it, and the sauce runs down the sides of the birds and pools around their legs. Then the servers come. 3 young women in linen aprons, their hair covered with white coifs. They take the platters carefully, holding them level, and they walk out the door and up the stairs. The sound of their footsteps fades. Agatha watches the doorway for a moment, then turns back to the fire. The kitchen exhales. Now comes the second wave. The servants and the lower household will eat after the Lord has finished, and their meal is the same pottage, the same bread, maybe a few scraps from the high table if the steward is feeling generous. Agatha sends a boy to the hall to stand in the corner and watch. He is to report back if the Lord pushes his trencher away, because that means the meal is ending, and the kitchen needs to start preparing the next course. But the Lord is a slow eater. He likes to chew each bite for a long time, looking around the room, making conversation. The boy will stand in the corner for an hour, maybe two, and his feet will hurt, and he will not dare to shift his weight. Down in the kitchen, the pace drops again. Robin sits on the floor with his back against the wall and closes his eyes. The smallest boy brings in a load of kindling and stacks it near the hearth, then goes to the well to refill the buckets. The turnspit dog gets a piece of bread dipped in pottage, which it eats in 3 bites without chewing. Agatha takes the pot of drippings from under the capon spit and pours it into a smaller pot to cool. The fat will rise to the top and harden into something like butter, and tomorrow morning she will use it to fry slices of bread for the Lord's breakfast. Nothing is wasted here. Nothing can be wasted. The afternoon light through the smoke hole has shifted. It comes in at a different angle now, longer and yellower, and it falls across the table in a wide stripe. In that stripe, you can see the fine dust of flour and the small dark specks of ground pepper and the occasional feather that floated off the pigeons during the turning. The kitchen is never clean, not the way you understand clean. But it is not dirty in a way that matters. The fire burns hot enough to kill most things. The flies come in the summer, but it is not summer now, and the cold keeps them away. The cold keeps a lot of things away. The afternoon is the loneliest time in the kitchen. The morning has its purpose and its urgency. The evening will have its own rush, its own dinner to prepare. But the afternoon, the long stretch between midday and the first shadows of late day, is just maintenance. The fires need feeding every hour. The pottage needs stirring every half hour. The bread needs to be checked for mold, the salted meat turned in its brine, the onions sorted for soft spots. It is work that fills the time without filling the mind. Your hands move, your eyes move, your thoughts drift somewhere else, somewhere warmer or quieter or less full of smoke. Agatha's thoughts drift to her daughter, who is 14 and works in the dairy, churning butter and pressing cheese. She sees the girl sometimes at the end of the day, when both of them are too tired to talk. They sit on the same bench near the kitchen door, and they do not speak, and that is the whole of their relationship now. Not coldness, exhaustion. There is a difference, but from the outside it looks the same. Robin has a wife somewhere in the village, but he sleeps in the kitchen most nights because the walk home is too long and his feet hurt. His wife does not complain anymore. She stopped complaining years ago, after the 3rd child was born and the 2nd died. Complaining changed nothing. The dead child stayed dead, and the walk stayed long, and Robin stayed in the kitchen. Now they see each other on Sundays after Mass, and they eat a meal together in silence, and then he walks back to the castle. That is marriage. That is survival. The boy who went to the hall comes back with news. The Lord has finished the first course. The platters are being cleared. The steward wants the second course in about an hour. A small roasted fish for each person, if the fishmonger came this morning. Agatha nods. The fishmonger did come. He came at dawn with a basket of eels and a few small pike, still wet and flopping. The eels are in a barrel of water in the corner, and the pike are packed in wet rushes to keep them cool. She sends Robin to check on the fish. He lifts the rushes and looks at the pike. Their eyes are cloudy, which is not good, but their gills are still red, which is not bad. They will be fine. They have to be fine. The eels are another matter. Eels are not popular with the Lord, who says they taste like mud, but the steward insists on serving them because they are cheap and the kitchen has a lot of them. Agatha knows how to make eels taste less like mud. She will cook them in the same pottage for a few minutes, then lift them out and coat them in a mixture of breadcrumbs, parsley, and a little saffron, expensive, but the Lord likes the color yellow, and the steward has approved the saffron for special occasions. The passing Baron counts as a special occasion, barely. She begins to prepare the eels while the pike wait their turn. She reaches into the barrel and pulls out an eel by the tail. The eel writhes, slick and muscular, and she smacks its head against the edge of the table once, twice, and it goes still. She cuts behind the head, slits the belly, pulls out the insides with 2 fingers. The guts go into a bucket for the pigs. The eel goes into a bowl of clean water to rinse. She does this 9 more times, 10 eels in all, and by the end her hands smell like river and bile, and she washes them in a basin of cold water, but the smell does not come off. It never comes off until hours later. The pike are easier. They are dead already, killed at the fishmonger's stall. Agatha scales them with a dull knife, scraping from tail to head, and the scales fly off like little pieces of mica and stick to her sleeves. She guts them, saves the roe from the 2 females in a small bowl, and washes the cavities. The roe will be mixed with herbs and fried later for the servants' table. She does not waste roe. She does not waste anything. Robin builds up the fire under the 3rd cauldron, the smallest one, and fills it with water and a little salt. When the water boils, he lowers the pike in one by one on a long-handled skimmer. The fish turn white and firm in the bubbling water, their mouths opening and closing as if they are still trying to breathe. He watches them for exactly the right amount of time. He knows it by the way the eyes change from glassy to opaque, and then he lifts them out onto a cloth to drain. The eels will be fried in a pan with hot fat, because the Lord hates boiled eels but will tolerate fried eels if they are crispy enough. The kitchen smells like fish now, which is better than the smoke but not by much. The fish smell mixes with the pottage smell and the bread smell and the old grease smell, and the whole thing becomes something you could almost taste in the air, heavy and wet and animal. The smallest boy wrinkles his nose. Agatha smacks him lightly on the back of the head. No complaining. There is no complaining in the kitchen. The 2nd course goes up. The pike on a long platter, arranged head to tail in a neat row. The eels on a separate platter, curled into circles like little brown wheels, each one sprinkled with the saffron bread crumbs, so they glow faintly yellow in the torchlight. A dish of the fried roe goes to the steward's table, because the steward likes roe and the steward has power. The servers carry everything up the stairs, moving slowly, carefully. This time, one of them trips on the 2nd step from the top. The platter of eels tilts. 2 eels slide off and land on the stone step, and the server picks them up with her bare hands and puts them back on the platter, and nobody says anything because the floor of the stairwell is swept daily and the eels are hot and a little dirt never killed anyone. She keeps walking. The Lord will never know. Down in the kitchen, the pottage is still simmering. The servants will eat soon, and the pottage will be served with the heel of the bread and a cup of the small beer. Agatha ladles herself a bowl of it now, because she has not eaten since last night, and she stands by the fire and eats it standing up. She does not use a spoon. She tips the bowl to her mouth and drinks the broth, then picks out the chunks of bacon with her fingers. The pottage is good. It is always good. She has been making it the same way for 20 years, and it tastes exactly the way it always has, and that is the only compliment she needs. Outside, the light is beginning to fail. The winter afternoon is short, and the sun is already behind the outer wall, and the yard is filling with blue shadow. The well boy brings in the last load of water for the day, and the wood boy brings in the last load of wood, and the gatekeeper closes the outer gate against the cold. The castle turns inward, folding itself up for the night. The kitchen turns inward too. The fires are built up for the evening, bigger than the morning fires because the night will be colder and the cooking will be heavier. The evening meal is smaller than the midday meal, a light supper of leftovers and bread and maybe a tart if there are eggs and apples. But the preparation for the evening meal is the same as always. Fetching, chopping, stirring, waiting. Agatha is tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind of tired that sleep just pauses until morning. She leans against the warm stone of the hearth and closes her eyes for a minute. The heat presses against her face. The sound of the fire is like a low conversation she has been listening to her whole life. The small boy, the smallest one, the one who runs errands and eats standing up, is sitting on the floor near the dog, carving a piece of wood with a dull knife. He is making something, though it is not clear what. A horse, maybe. Person. A lump with legs. He has been working on it for 3 days, a few minutes at a time, and it looks exactly the same as it did on the first day. But he keeps carving, and the dog watches him with its chin on its paws, and the fire pops and settles, and the light in the room turns orange and low. This is the hour when the kitchen feels almost peaceful. Not happy. Peaceful is different. Peaceful is when the work is done enough that you can stop fighting it and just let it happen. The pottage will simmer whether you stir it or not. The bread will be eaten whether you worry about it or not. The fish are gone. The eels are gone. The Lord is full, and the steward is satisfied, and the baron has gone to his guest chamber to sleep off the wine. Nothing more is required from the kitchen until the evening meal, and the evening meal is easy. Leftovers. Bread. Maybe a few sliced apples if the storeroom has any left. Robin goes outside to piss in the yard, and he stands there for a moment looking up at the sky. The stars are coming out, hard and sharp and cold. He cannot name them. Nobody can. But he knows that winter stars are different from summer stars, brighter somehow, or maybe just closer. He goes back inside and the kitchen door bangs shut behind him. Agatha opens her eyes. She pushes off from the hearth and walks to the table, where the remains of the fish platters have been brought back down from the hall. The pike are picked clean, just skeletons with heads attached. The eels are mostly gone, a few crusts of saffron breading stuck to the platter. A single piece of the roe, untouched, sits in a small dish. She eats the roe in one bite. It is cold and crumbly and still tastes of the frying fat. She licks her fingers. The cleaning begins. The big cauldron is lifted off the fire and set on the floor to cool. The leftover pottage will be left in the cauldron overnight, because it is easier to reheat it in the morning than to store it somewhere else. The wooden spoons and ladles are rinsed in a bucket of water and left to dry on the edge of the table. The platters are scraped into a bucket for the pigs, the bucket that the smallest boy will carry out to the sty in the morning. The knives are wiped on a rag and put back on the shelf. The table is scrubbed with a handful of wet sand and a rough cloth, and the sand scrapes away the dried sauce and the fish scales and the little bits of herb, leaving the wood wet and dark and clean enough for tomorrow. The fire is banked for the night. Agatha rakes the coals into a pile in the center of the hearth and covers them with ash. The logs are pushed to the edges, where they will smolder slowly, feeding the coals just enough heat to keep them alive. In the morning, she will rake the ash back and find the coals still glowing, like the single red eye of something that never really sleeps. The kitchen settles. The night crew comes in, 2 different boys, older than the day boys, with the kind of faces that look tired even when they are not. They will watch the fire through the night, add logs when it sinks too low, and sleep in shifts on the pallets near the door. Their job is not really to cook. Their job is to be awake, just in case. In case the fire goes out. In case someone comes down from the hall wanting hot wine. In case the Lord has a nightmare and decides he wants a snack at 3 in the morning. It happens sometimes. The Lord is a human like anyone else, and humans get hungry in the dark. And when the Lord is hungry, the kitchen must be ready. Agatha pulls her wool cloak tighter around her shoulders and walks out the kitchen door and across the yard to the small room where she sleeps. It is not a room, really. Closet. A space behind the pantry where they store the empty barrels. She has a straw mattress on the floor, a wool blanket, and a pillow stuffed with feathers from last year's geese. She lies down and pulls the blanket up to her chin. The cold seeps up from the floor, but the blanket is thick and her body heat will warm the straw in a few minutes. She stares at the ceiling, which is just the underside of the floorboards above, and listens to the mice moving in the walls. She does not think about the next day. There is no need. The next day will be the same as this day and the day before and the day before that. The fire will need raking. The water will need fetching. The bread will need kneading. The pottage will need stirring. The fishmonger will come or he will not. The steward will complain or he will not. The Lord will eat and the servants will eat, and the kitchen will do what it has always done, which is to turn raw things into warm things and warm things into empty plates and empty plates into the small satisfaction of another day survived. The mice scratch. The wind outside picks up, and a thin whistle of air comes through a crack in the wall. Agatha closes her eyes. She does not fall asleep right away. She lies there with her eyes closed, breathing slowly, her hands on her stomach, her feet cold even under the blanket. Somewhere above her, in the great hall, the last of the torches are being put out. Somewhere in the village, a dog barks once and then is silent. Somewhere in the kitchen, the night boys are sitting by the fire, not talking, just watching the coals breathe in and out. Agatha turns onto her side and pulls her knees up toward her chest. The straw rustles. The blanket settles. The cold floor stops mattering. The mice scratch again, softer now, as if they too are settling in for the night. And the kitchen sits in the dark of the castle, the heart of it, the low warm belly of the stone animal, waiting for the morning when it all starts over. The night passes like a held breath. The two boys in the kitchen take turns sleeping, one on each pallet, while the other sits on a stool by the hearth and watches the coals. The first boy, the older one whose name is What, has a piece of bread in his pocket that he saved from the servant's supper. He eats it slowly, tearing off small pieces and letting them soften in his mouth before swallowing. He does not know how old he is, 12, maybe 13. He was left at the kitchen door when he was small and Agatha fed him, and now he works here, and that is the whole of his story. He does not think about it as a story. He thinks about it as Wednesday. The fire is low, just a nest of orange coals with a single log balanced across them. The log has a crack in it, and from the crack a small flame flickers, blue at the base and yellow at the tip. What watches the flame? He watches it for a long time. The other boy, whose name is Piers, is asleep on the pallet with his mouth open and one arm thrown over his face. He snores a little, a wet sound that stops and starts. What does not mind the snoring? He has slept through worse. At some point in the deepest part of the night, the Lord Steward comes down. He is wearing a fur-lined robe and carrying a candle in a brass holder. He wants warm wine for the Lord, who woke up with a chill. What wakes Piers? And the two of them work together to heat a small pot of wine over the coals, adding honey and a pinch of cinnamon from the spice box that only Agatha is supposed to open. The steward watches them, tapping his foot. When the wine is hot, he takes it and leaves without saying thank you. That is normal. No one says thank you in a castle. The food comes and the food goes, and the kitchen exists somewhere below the level of thanks. What and Piers sit by the fire again. They do not talk. There is nothing to talk about. The candle the steward left behind guttering on the table. The coals pulse. The night outside is black and full of cold, and the kitchen is a small island of not quite cold, and that is enough. The sky begins to lighten, but it is a slow lightening, a gray seepage that starts in the east and spreads like a stain. The roosters in the yard start their ragged chorus. Not all at once, but one by one, each one a little off rhythm. The stars fade. The shape of the window reappears, and then the shape of the table, and then the shape of the boy sleeping on the floor. The world comes back, slowly, reluctantly, the same way it comes back every morning. Agatha wakes in her closet behind the pantry. She does not remember dreaming. She never remembers dreaming. She lies still for a moment, feeling the cold on her face and the warmth of her own breath under the blanket. Then she sits up, swings her legs over the side of the mattress, and puts her feet on the cold floor. The floor is so cold it hurts, a sharp, clean pain that lasts for a second and then fades into numbness. She stands up. She pulls her tunic over her head. She walks out into the yard. The yard is gray and wet. The well is gray. The sky is gray. She walks to the kitchen door and pushes it open, and inside the fire is still alive, just barely, a small red heart in a bed of ash. what is sitting on the stool, his head nodding. He looks up when she comes in and his eyes are red and his face is pale. She does not say good morning. She walks to the hearth and picks up the iron hook and begins to rake the ash. And the kitchen wakes up. The day starts again. The same as always. The same as tomorrow will be. The water, the bread, the fire, the pottage, the platters going up the stairs and coming back down, the eels and the pike and the pigeons and the capons, the smoke in your eyes and the ache in your back and the sound of the ladle against the cauldron, the small boy carving his lump of wood, the dog dreaming of rabbits. And nothing ever ends, not really. It just pauses for a few hours and then continues the same slow cycle, the same low flame, the same cold well in the morning and the same tired hands at night. The steward will come down to check on the bread. The chamberlain will ask about the guests. The lord will want eggs poached in wine, and he will send them back because the yolks are too soft. And Agatha will poach new ones without changing her expression. The fire will burn. The water will boil. The smoke will rise. And the kitchen will keep turning, like a mill wheel, like a potter's wheel, like the earth itself, slow and patient and utterly indifferent to everything except the next hour. It is not a life anyone would choose, but it is a life that works. The food gets cooked, the people get fed, the castle stands, and in the kitchen, in the half-dark, in the heat and the smoke and the endless small motions of hands and knives and spoons, the medieval day drags itself forward, 1 minute at a time, 1 loaf at a time, 1 breath at a time. And the night will come again, and the coals will be banked, and the mice will scratch in the walls, and Agatha will lie down on her straw mattress and close her eyes and not dream, and the kitchen will wait. It is always waiting. It was waiting before she was born, and it will be waiting after she is gone, and the fire will still need raking, and the water will still need fetching, and someone will always be hungry, and someone will always be there to feed them. That is the rule. That is the only rule that matters in a medieval kitchen. The smoke hole shows a patch of pale morning sky. The fire cracks. The smallest boy comes in with an apron full of damp kindling. Robin appears in the doorway, rubbing his face with both hands. The turnspit dog stretches, yawns, and stands up. The day is beginning, or continuing. It is hard to tell the difference anymore. And so it goes. The morning of the second day arrives no differently than the first. The same gray light through the smoke hole, the same ache in the same joints, the same cold floor under bare feet. But the kitchen does not notice the repetition. Repetition is its natural state, the water it swims in, the air it breathes. The new day is just another turn of the same old wheel, and the wheel does not get bored. Agatha is already at the hearth when the rest of the kitchen stirs. She must have woken earlier than usual, or perhaps she never truly slept. The line between sleeping and waking has blurred over the years, until now she exists in a kind of permanent twilight, always aware of the fire even when her eyes are closed. She has the iron hook in her hand and the ash is already raked back, and the coals below are fat and red and ready. She adds logs without thinking about it. Her hands know what to do. Her hands have always known. The well boy goes out into the yard, and this time he takes the larger buckets because the cook used more water yesterday than she meant to. The yoke settles across his shoulders, and he walks with the small careful steps of someone who has already spilled water on himself twice this week and does not want to make it 3 times. The well rope is wet from yesterday and stiff from the cold, and it creaks as he lowers the bucket. The sound carries across the yard, a slow complaining squeak that stops when the bucket hits the water far below. He hauls it up hand over hand, and the rope burns his palms even through the calluses, and he does not stop because stopping means starting over. In the kitchen, Robin is checking the stores. He goes into the pantry, a narrow room off the main kitchen with no window and a dirt floor that stays cold even in summer. Shelves line the walls, rough planks of oak bowed under the weight of ceramic pots and wooden boxes and woven baskets. He runs his finger along the rims of the pots, feeling for moisture. Dry is good. Damp is bad. Damp means the seal has failed, and the grain inside will be growing things it should not grow. He finds a pot of barley that feels slightly tacky to the touch and makes a mental note to use it today, before the weevils find it or the mold takes hold. He will not tell Agatha. She does not like bad news in the morning. The salted fish from last week is still hanging from a hook in the ceiling, stiff and white and crusted with salt crystals. Robin cuts a small piece from the tail and tastes it. Too salty, but that is fixable. He will soak it in fresh water for an hour before cooking, and the water will pull out the excess salt, and the fish will be edible if not exactly enjoyable. The household does not eat for enjoyment. The household eats for fuel, and salt cod is fuel, hard and dense and lasting. The small boy, the one with the wooden lump he is still carving, sits near the door with a basket of onions between his feet. He is peeling them with a knife that is too big for his hand, and the tears run down his cheeks, and he does not wipe them because his sleeves are wet from the morning dew. He has been peeling onions since he was old enough to hold a knife, which is to say he does not remember a time before onions. The smell is on his hands all the time, under his fingernails, in the cuffs of his tunic. He does not notice it anymore. He does not notice a lot of things. The bread oven is lit. A different boy, one who works only with the oven and nothing else, feeds the fire inside the brick dome with small sticks of hazelwood. The hazel burns fast and hot, and the bricks absorb the heat quickly, turning from gray to pink to white. The boy knows the color he is looking for, the color of bone left in the sun for a year, pale and dry and almost glowing. When the bricks reach that color, he will rake out the fire and sweep the ash and slide in the loaves that Agatha has been shaping while he worked. The timing has to be exact. Too soon and the bread will be pale and gummy. Too late, and the crust will burn before the crumb cooks. The boy has been doing this for 3 years and he still gets it wrong sometimes, and when he gets it wrong Agatha does not yell but simply looks at him, and the looking is worse than any yelling. The great cauldron is back on its chain over the main fire, and the water inside is beginning to move, small circles forming on the surface and breaking apart. Agatha adds the bacon slab, the same one from yesterday, because a single slab can flavor 2 or 3 pots of pottage before it is finally eaten. The bacon is smaller now, the edges curled and dark, but the middle is still thick and pink and full of fat. She adds the leeks and the onions and the cabbage, the same vegetables as yesterday but from a different part of the garden, and she adds a handful of dried beans that have been soaking since last night. The beans are hard and wrinkled and look like small brown stones, but by evening they will be soft and swollen, and they will make the pottage thicker and the hunger less sharp. The turnspit dog is already in its wheel, waiting. No meat on the spit yet, but the dog knows the routine. It will be fed after the work, never before. Work first, then food. The dog has learned this the same way the humans have learned it, through repetition and hunger and the simple math of a world where nothing comes for free. It stands in the wheel with its head low and its tail tucked, and it waits. The chamberlain comes to the door again, but this time he does not speak. He just stands there for a moment, looking at the kitchen, then turns and walks away. Agatha watches him go. She knows what that look means. Something has changed. Something always changes. A guest has arrived unexpectedly, or a guest has left early, or the Lord has decided he wants venison for dinner even though there is no venison in the larder. The chamberlain will come back when he has the details. Until then, the kitchen continues as if nothing has changed, because most of the time nothing has changed, and guessing wrong is worse than waiting. The morning light shifts from gray to pale yellow. The sun is up somewhere behind the clouds, and the smoke hole lets in a weak version of it, thin and watery and not warm. Robin goes outside to the garden and comes back with a handful of sage and a few sprigs of rosemary that have survived the frost. The rosemary is tough and woody, but the leaves still have their oil, and when he crushes them between his fingers the smell is sharp and clean. He adds the herbs to a small mortar and begins to grind them with a pestle, mixing them with a pinch of salt and a splash of vinegar to make a paste. The paste will go on a piece of pork that is destined for the high table tonight, if the pork is still good. He will check the pork after he finishes the paste. The pork is in a barrel of brine in the corner of the pantry. Robin pulls the lid off and reaches in with his bare arm up to the elbow. The brine is cold and cloudy, and the meat floats in it like something drowned. He finds the edge of the pork shoulder and pulls it up. The meat is firm and pale, the fat white and solid. He sniffs it. It smells like salt and pork and nothing else. Good. He puts it back and covers the barrel. The pork will come out tonight and be roasted slowly on the spit, basted with its own fat and the herb paste, and by the time it reaches the high table the crust will be dark and crackling and the inside will be so tender it falls apart under the knife. The midday meal today is simpler than yesterday. No baron, no retinue. Just the household, the usual mouths, the usual expectations. Agatha decides on a thick pottage with the bacon and the beans, served with the fresh bread and a dish of pickled vegetables from the autumn preserving. The pickled vegetables are in a crock in the pantry, buried under a layer of waxed cloth and a wooden lid. They are carrots and turnips and small onions, preserved in vinegar and salt and a little honey, and they are the only fresh thing the kitchen will serve until spring. Not fresh, really, but not dried, not salted. Pickled is a third state, a kind of preserved life that still has some crunch and some color, and the household craves that crunch the way a man in the desert craves water. The boy who works the bread oven rakes out the fire. The bricks are white hot, and the heat comes off them in waves that make the air shimmer. He sweeps the ash carefully, pushing it out through the oven door with a long-handled brush made of twigs. Then he takes the peel, the long wooden paddle, and slides the loaves into the oven one by one. The loaves are round and flat and dusted with bran, and they make a soft sound when they hit the hot brick. He closes the oven with a wet rag stuffed into the opening, and the rag hisses and steams, and then it is quiet. The bread will bake for about an hour. While it bakes, the kitchen fills with the smell of it, that dark malty smell that is the closest thing this place has to comfort. Agatha stands near the oven with her arms crossed, not watching it but feeling it, the way the heat changes as the moisture leaves the dough and the crust hardens. She knows when it is done without looking. The sound of the loaf when you tap the bottom. The way the steam stops rising from the cracks. The small things that only a person who has baked 1,000 loaves can feel in her bones. The morning is half gone. The sun is higher now, and the light through the smoke hole falls directly on the table, illuminating the scars and the stains and the fine dust of flour. The well boy brings in the last bucket of water and sets it by the hearth. The onion boy has finished peeling and is now chopping, the knife coming down in a steady rhythm that never varies. Thump, thump, thump. The pieces of onion are all the same size, because he has been taught that uneven pieces cook unevenly, and uneven cooking is the mark of an amateur. He is not an amateur. He is 10 years old, and he has been doing this for 5 years, and his knife work is better than most adults in the village. Robin takes the pork out of the brine and sets it on the table. The meat is heavy and wet, and the brine drips off it and pools on the wood. He pats it dry with a cloth, then rubs the herb paste all over the surface, working it into the cracks and crevices with his fingers. The paste is green and gritty, and it sticks to his hands long after he has washed them. He will smell like rosemary for the rest of the day, which is not a bad thing. The kitchen smells like many things, but rosemary is one of the better ones. The spit is set up over the fire, and the pork is threaded onto the iron rod. It is a heavy piece of meat, and the spit bends slightly under the weight. The turnspit dog is put into the wheel, and the dog begins to trot, and the spit begins to turn. The pork rotates past the flames, and the fat on the surface begins to soften and shine. A pan underneath catches the drippings, which will be used to baste the meat and later to enrich the pottage. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is ever wasted. The afternoon settles in like an old man lowering himself into a chair. The bread comes out of the oven, dark and fragrant, and is set on a rack to cool. The pottage bubbles and thickens. The pork turns slowly, basted every few minutes with its own fat, and the skin begins to blister and brown. The kitchen is warm now, almost hot, and the smoke hangs in a blue haze near the ceiling. The turnspit dog pants as it trots, its tongue hanging out, its eyes half closed. The boys move around the room like sleepwalkers, doing the same tasks they did yesterday and the day before, their faces empty of expression. Agatha sits on the upturned barrel again, not resting but thinking. The chamberlain still has not come back with news about the Lord's plans, and the uncertainty sits in her stomach like a cold stone. She does not like uncertainty. Uncertainty means wasted food or not enough food, and both are bad. She looks at the pantry door and makes a mental list of what is inside. Salt pork, salt fish, barley, dried peas, a small wheel of hard cheese that has been aging since summer, a basket of apples wrinkled and sweet. She could feed an extra 10 people with what she has, or 20 if they are willing to eat thin pottage. But if the Lord wants something special, something fresh, she does not have it. The fishmonger comes only twice a week, and today is not one of those days. The uncertainty resolves itself in the worst possible way. The chamberlain's boy appears in the doorway, out of breath, and says the Lord wants a peacock. Peacock. For tonight. The Lord's brother is arriving unexpectedly, and the brother has a taste for the dramatic, and nothing is more dramatic than a roasted peacock served in its own skin with the feathers reattached. Agatha stares at the boy for a long moment. Then she stands up and walks to the small cage where the peacocks are kept. 2 of them, purchased in the autumn and fed through the winter at great expense. She opens the cage and reaches in, and the peacock squawks and flaps its iridescent wings, and she catches it by the neck and twists. The kitchen goes quiet. Robin stops stirring. The boy stops chopping. Even the turnspit dog stops trotting for a moment, as if it knows that something has changed. Agatha carries the peacock to the table and lays it down. The feathers are blue and green and gold, and they catch the firelight and throw it back in small bright flashes. She begins to pluck the bird, not carefully but quickly, pulling out handfuls of feathers and dropping them on the floor. The bare skin underneath is pale and unremarkable, like a chicken's skin but looser, more wrinkled. When the bird is plucked, she cuts off the head and the feet and sets them aside. The head will be saved for the presentation, propped up with a wire so the peacock looks alive. The feet will be used for nothing. They go to the pig bucket. Robin comes over to help. He knows how to prepare a peacock for presentation, though he has only done it twice before. The skin must be removed in one piece without tearing, so that it can be put back on after the bird is roasted. He makes a cut down the back and begins to peel the skin away from the meat, working his fingers between the skin and the flesh. The skin is tough and leathery, and it comes off slowly, making a wet tearing sound. Agatha works on the other side, and together they remove the entire skin from neck to tail, turning it inside out like a sock. The feathers are still attached to the outside of the skin, and when they turn it right side out again, the bird looks whole, just empty. The peacock meat is spitted and put over the fire. It is a small bird, not much bigger than a large chicken, and it will roast quickly. While it roasts, Agatha works on the skin, stretching it over a wooden frame she has made from 2 crossed sticks. The frame holds the skin open so it can dry slightly and so the feathers stay arranged in the right direction. When the meat is cooked, she will stuff it back into the skin and serve it on a platter with the head reattached. And the Lord's brother will be impressed, and the Lord will be pleased, and the kitchen will get none of the credit but all of the blame if something goes wrong. The peacock skin sits on the table, watching the room with empty eye sockets. The smallest boy stares at it for a long time, then looks away. He does not like the way the feathers still shine even though the bird is dead. It seems wrong to him, though he cannot say why. He goes back to chopping onions, and the tears come again, and this time he is almost grateful for them. The afternoon wears on. The pork is done, dark and crackling, and is moved to a cool corner to rest. The peacock meat is done, pale and tender, and is allowed to cool just enough to handle. Agatha stuffs the meat back into the skin, working it in with her hands, pushing and prodding until the skin fits snugly around the flesh. She sews up the back with a needle and coarse thread, then attaches the head with a small wooden dowel. The peacock looks alive. It looks like it is sleeping, or thinking, or about to speak. She sets it on a platter and arranges the tail feathers in a fan, and the firelight catches them and turns them into something that is almost beautiful. But there is no time to admire it. The evening meal is coming, and the kitchen is behind. The pottage has been neglected, and it is too thick, the bottom starting to catch. Agatha adds a ladleful of water and stirs vigorously, scraping the bottom of the cauldron with the wooden spoon. The burned bits come up in dark flakes and dissolve into the broth, and the taste will be slightly bitter now, but she hopes no one will notice. They might not. The Lord's brother will be drinking heavily, and the Lord will be matching him drink for drink. And by the time the pottage is served, their tongues will be too numb to taste much of anything. The pickled vegetables are brought out of the pantry and put into a small bowl. The bread is sliced and arranged on a wooden board. The cheese is cut into wedges, the rind left on because the rind holds the shape. The servers come down, the same young women in their linen aprons, and they carry the food up the stairs. The peacock goes first because it is the centerpiece, the thing everyone will talk about. Agatha watches it go up the stairs, the feathers bobbing slightly with each step, and she thinks about how much work went into something that will be eaten in 20 minutes and forgotten by morning. Then she stops thinking about it because thinking about it does not change anything, and the fire needs more wood. The evening meal is served. The kitchen hears the sounds from above, the murmur of voices, the clink of pottery, the occasional burst of laughter. The sounds are muffled by the stone ceiling, turned into something distant and watery, like listening to a conversation underwater. Agatha does not listen. She eats her own meal standing by the fire, a bowl of the slightly burned pottage and a piece of bread torn from a loaf that was too misshapen to send upstairs. The pottage is bitter, but she eats it anyway. She has eaten worse. The night comes down again, the same as the night before, the same as every night. The fires are banked. The platters come back down, scraped clean. The peacock nothing but bones and a ragged pile of feathers that someone has pulled off as a souvenir. The feathers go into a basket to be saved for something else. A hat, a costume, a decoration for next year's Christmas feast. Nothing is wasted. The peacock is wasted, in a way, because it was more show than substance, but the feathers will last, and the bones will go into the next pottage to give it flavor, and the bird will live on in 100 small ways that no one will ever trace back to the original. The night boys come in. What is one of them again? And a new boy whose name Agatha cannot remember. They sit by the fire, and the kitchen settles into its night rhythm. The low pulse of coals and the small sounds of mice and the occasional shift of a sleeping dog. Agatha walks across the yard to her closet behind the pantry. The stars are out, cold and bright, and she looks up at them for a moment before ducking inside. She does not know their names, but she knows they are there, and that is enough. She lies down on the straw mattress. The blanket is cold, and she pulls it over her head and curls into a ball. The mice scratch in the walls. The wind blows through the crack. Somewhere in the kitchen, what is watching the coals, and his face is empty, and his hands are still, and the fire breathes in and out like a sleeping animal. The night is long, but the night always ends, and the morning will come, and the water will need fetching, and the fire will need raking, and the kitchen will turn again, and turn again, and turn again. The third morning is colder than the first two. A hard frost has settled overnight, and the yard is white with it, the grass stiff and brittle underfoot. The well rope is frozen solid, and the well boy has to pound it against the stone curb to break the ice before he can lower the bucket. The sound of it echoes across the yard, a sharp crack that repeats every few seconds, like someone knocking on a door that will never open. His fingers are red and raw, and he blows on them between buckets, but the warmth of his breath does nothing against the cold. The kitchen is no warmer than the yard, but at least the fire is there, a promise of heat that has not yet arrived. Agatha is already at work when the well boy comes in. She has built the fire higher than usual, piling on logs until the flames reach halfway up the chimney. The heat is slow to build, the cold stone of the walls sucking it away as fast as the fire makes it, but eventually the room begins to warm and the frost on the inside of the window. There is a window, a small one, glazed with oiled linen instead of glass, begins to melt and run down in thin streaks. Agatha wipes her hands on her apron and looks at the window. The light through the linen is pale and diffuse, like light through a bruise, and it casts no shadows. The bread oven is lit, but the boy who works it is having trouble. The damp from the cold has gotten into the kindling, and the fire sputters and smokes instead of catching. He blows on it gently, then harder, and a small flame leaps up and dies. He blows again, and this time the flame catches and spreads, and the hazelwood begins to crackle. His face is close to the oven door, and the smoke blows back into his eyes, and he blinks and coughs but does not move. He cannot afford to move. If the fire goes out, the bread will be late, and a late breakfast means a late dinner, and a late dinner means the steward will be angry, and an angry steward is a problem for everyone. Robin comes in from the pantry with a look on his face that Agatha does not like. The cheese is sweating. He noticed it this morning, a thin film of moisture on the surface of the wheel, and moisture on cheese means the wheel is turning. Not turning bad, not yet, but turning. The cheese was made in the summer, pressed and salted and set aside to age, and it should be good until Easter. But something has gone wrong with the storage, or the wheel was not pressed hard enough, or the milk came from a cow that was sick. Whatever the reason, the cheese is sweating, and sweating cheese goes bad faster than dry cheese, and a whole wheel of cheese is too much to eat in a day. Robin brings the wheel out of the pantry and sets it on the table. The surface is damp and slightly tacky, and when he presses his finger into the rind, the indentation stays. That is not good. That is very not good. Agatha comes over and looks at the wheel, her face as flat as ever. She cuts a small wedge from the edge and tastes it. The cheese is still good, but the flavor is stronger than it should be, sharper, with a hint of something that is not quite right. She tells Robin to cut the wheel into pieces and salt them heavily, then put the pieces in a crock with olive oil to cover them. The oil will keep the air away, and the salt will slow the spoiling, and they will have to use the cheese quickly, but it will not be wasted. Nothing is wasted. The cutting takes time. Robin uses a heavy knife and a wooden mallet, tapping the back of the blade to drive it through the hard rind. The cheese cracks and splits, revealing a pale yellow interior dotted with small holes. The smell is stronger now, sharp and almost sour, and the boy chopping onions wrinkles his nose. Agatha ignores the smell. She has smelled worse. She has smelled things that would make a gravedigger gag, and she is still here, and the cheese is still edible, and that is all that matters. The morning meal is a thin porridge made from the barley that Robin found in the damp pot. The barley is used today because it cannot wait any longer, and Agatha cooks it with water and a little salt and the last of the milk from the dairy. The milk is sour almost to the point of turning, but the heat of cooking kills the worst of it, and the sourness gives the porridge a tang that is not entirely unpleasant. She serves it in wooden bowls, one for each person in the kitchen, and they eat it standing up or sitting on the floor or leaning against the wall. Nobody complains. The porridge is hot, and hot is enough. The Lord does not eat breakfast. The Lord sleeps late, especially after a night of drinking with his brother, and the kitchen is expected to have food ready whenever he finally appears. Agatha keeps a pot of warm water on the fire for the Lord's washing water, and a plate of bread and cheese and cold meat on the sideboard, covered with a cloth to keep the flies away. The flies are not a problem in winter, but the cloth also keeps the dust off, and the dust is always a problem. The kitchen is full of dust, fine ash and flour and dried herb particles, and it settles on everything within an hour of being wiped clean. The brother is still here. That is the news the chamberlain brings when he finally appears, mid-morning, his breath fogging in the cold air of the kitchen doorway. The brother will stay for 3 more days, maybe 4, and he has brought his own cook. His own cook. Agatha's face does not change, but something behind her eyes goes hard. A guest bringing his own cook is an insult. It means the guest does not trust the household kitchen, or wants to show off, or both. The brother's cook will work alongside Agatha's kitchen, using the same fire and the same tools and the same space, and there will be 2 authorities in a room that has only ever had one. The brother's cook arrives an hour later. His name is Hugh, and he is from London, or so he says, and he wears a clean white apron and carries his own knives in a leather roll. He is younger than Agatha, maybe 30, with soft hands and a way of looking at the kitchen that makes it clear he thinks it is primitive. He does not say this. He does not need to. The way he touches the cauldron with one finger, the way he looks at the turnspit dog, the way he sniffs the pottage and then does not comment. All of it says the same thing. This is not how he would do things. This is not how things are done in London. Agatha ignores him. She goes about her work as if he is not there, and after a while, Hugh realizes that ignoring him is its own kind of power. He cannot work if she will not acknowledge him. He cannot use the fire if she is already using it. He cannot command the boys if they are already following her orders. So he stands near the door with his knives in his hand, and he waits, and his waiting is a small defeat that he will not admit to. The day's cooking is split, unofficially. Agatha controls the main hearth and the bread oven. Hugh is given a small brazier, a portable iron bowl on legs, and a bag of charcoal to burn in it. He sets it up in the corner near the window and begins to prepare a dish of his own. A subtlety, a fancy thing made of almond paste and sugar and rosewater, shaped to look like a castle. It is not food, not really. It is decoration, a showpiece for the high table, something to make the brother look generous and the lord look wealthy. Agatha watches him out of the corner of her eye as he works the almond paste with his soft hands, and she feels nothing. Not anger, not jealousy, just the cold recognition that there are different ways to feed people, and her way is for feeding and his way is for showing off, and one of them will still be here after the other has gone back to London. The morning passes in a strange, divided silence. Hugh's brazier glows red in the corner, and the smell of rosewater and sugar mixes with the smoke and the pottage and the old grease, creating something cloying and sweet that does not belong here. The smallest boy stares at Hugh's hands as they shape the almond paste, and he wonders what it would be like to work with food that did not come from the ground or the sty. He does not know. He has never eaten sugar. He has heard of it, the way he has heard of the ocean and the Pope and the great walled city of Constantinople, but he has never seen it with his own eyes until now. Agatha sends him to the garden to pull leeks, and he goes gratefully, escaping the sweet smell for the cold, clean air of the yard. The frost is still on the ground, and the leeks are hard to pull, their roots frozen into the earth. He tugs and twists until they come free, and the dirt on the roots is frozen too, clumping together in dark brown balls that fall off as he carries them back. He walks slowly, not because he is tired, but because he does not want to go back inside. Outside, the air is sharp and clear, and he can see the whole sky, gray and low and full of more snow that has not yet decided to fall. Inside, the air is thick and hot and divided, and he can feel the tension between Agatha and Hugh like a third person in the room. He goes back inside. The leeks go into the pottage. Hugh does not look up from his almond castle. Agatha does not look at Hugh. The kitchen continues. The midday meal is awkward. The brother and the lord eat in the hall, and Hugh's subtlety is served as a first course. A tiny castle made of sugar sitting on a silver platter. The lord is impressed. The brother is proud. Agatha's pottage comes second, and it is eaten without comment, which is the best she can hope for. The servants eat in the kitchen, the same pottage with the same bread, and Hugh eats with them because he has nowhere else to go. He sits on a stool near his brazier and eats his pottage in small, reluctant bites, and his face says that this is not how things are done in London, but he eats it anyway because he is hungry. The afternoon is long. Hugh finishes his subtlety. It took him 4 hours to make a thing that will be eaten in 5 minutes, and begins to pack up his brazier and his knives. He will return to the brother's chamber and wait for the evening meal, when he will prepare another subtlety, something different, maybe a peacock of his own but made of marzipan instead of meat. Agatha does not watch him go. She is at the table, grinding spices for the evening pottage, cinnamon and ginger and a little pepper, the good black pepper that comes from so far away that no one in the kitchen knows where it comes from, only that it costs more than a pig. The evening meal is smaller. The brother is tired from drinking, and the lord is tired from entertaining, and both of them want simple food. Agatha serves a thick pottage with chunks of the sweating cheese melted into it, and a dish of the pickled vegetables, and the last of the bread from the morning. It is not fancy, but it is hot, and the Lord eats it without complaint. The brother eats it too, though he pushes the cheese to the side of his bowl. Agatha notices this. She does not care. The night comes. The fires are banked. The kitchen settles. Hugh is gone, back to London in his mind if not his body, and the kitchen is itself again. Just the same people and the same smoke and the same endless small tasks. Agatha sits on the upturned barrel for a long time after the others have gone to sleep. She does not think about Hugh. She does not think about the brother. She thinks about the cheese and the salted fish and the barley that is almost gone, and the weeks of winter still ahead. She thinks about the garden, frozen solid, and the months before anything new will grow. She thinks about the fire and the wood pile, and whether there is enough to last until spring. She gets up and walks to the wood pile. It is stacked against the outer wall of the kitchen, a long row of split logs covered with a tarpaulin made of old sailcloth. She counts the logs, not by number but by how many she can carry in 2 arms, and how many of those armloads it takes to fill the space beside the hearth. She does the math in her head, slowly, the way she does everything. There is enough wood for maybe 3 more weeks. Maybe 4 if they burn smaller fires and huddle together for warmth. After that, they will have to burn furniture, or break apart the old barrels, or send the boys into the forest to find deadfall. The forest is dangerous in winter. The wolves are hungry, and the cold kills as surely as any wolf. She goes back inside and lies down on her mattress. The mice are quiet tonight, or she cannot hear them over the sound of her own breathing. She pulls the blanket over her head and closes her eyes. The wood problem will still be there in the morning. Everything will still be there in the morning. The kitchen does not solve problems. It outlasts them or it does not, and either way the sun comes up and the fire needs raking and the water needs fetching. That is the deal. That has always been the deal. The next day the brother leaves. He goes before dawn. His horses led out of the stable one by one, their breath steaming in the cold air. Hugh goes with him, his clean apron and his soft hands and his leather roll of knives, and the kitchen exhales. Not with relief exactly, with the quiet settling of something that has been disturbed. The kitchen returns to its normal rhythm, the rhythm it has had for years, the rhythm it will have for years to come. The pottage bubbles, the bread bakes, the turnspit dog trots, and Agatha stands by the fire with her arms crossed, watching the smoke rise, her face as empty and calm as a winter pond. The days blend together after that. It is hard to tell one from another, and the kitchen does not try. Monday is like Tuesday. Wednesday is like Thursday. The only difference is the food, and even the food is mostly the same. Salt pork, salt fish, barley, beans, cabbage, onions. The same pottage day after day until the memory of fresh meat is just a memory, and the memory of fresh vegetables is a dream. The apples are gone, eaten one by one until the last wrinkled fruit is consumed on a night that no one will remember. The cheese is gone too. The sweating will eaten in thick slices and molten chunks and grated into the pottage until the crock is empty and the oil is poured back into the bottle for next time. The boy with the wooden lump keeps carving. The lump has slowly taken shape, though it is still not clear what it is supposed to be. A horse, maybe. A dog. Person with no arms. He carves a little each day, a few strokes of the knife, and the wood chips fall onto the floor and are swept into the fire. The dog watches him. The dog has nothing else to do. The well freezes solid. Not the water in the well, the water deep down is still liquid, but the rope and the bucket and the rim of the well itself. The well boy has to build a small fire at the base of the well to thaw the rope enough to lower the bucket, and the fire sends up smoke that mingles with the smoke from the kitchen chimney, and the whole yard smells like wet ash and burned rope. The water comes up cold and clean, and the boy carries it inside with hands that have lost all feeling. He does not complain. Complaining would take more energy than he has. A lamb is born in the village, too early, too small, and it dies before noon. The shepherd brings the body to the kitchen, because the kitchen can use anything, and Robin takes the lamb and skins it and butchers it and adds the meat to the pottage. The meat is pale and soft, almost translucent, and it falls apart in the boiling water and disappears into the broth. The skin is stretched on a frame to dry, and the wool is washed and carded and set aside for spinning. Nothing is wasted. The shepherd goes back to his flock with an empty stomach but a full heart, because the kitchen gave him a bowl of pottage for his trouble, and the pottage was hot. The days are short. The sun rises late and sets early, and the kitchen lives in a perpetual twilight, lit only by the fire and the occasional candle. The smoke hole shows a circle of gray sky that darkens and lightens but never changes color. The window shows nothing but the inside of the well-boy's chest when he passes by. The kitchen has become a world unto itself, a closed system of heat and hunger and work, and the outside world is just a rumor, a story that someone tells but no one quite believes. Agatha's daughter comes from the dairy to visit. She brings a small pat of fresh butter, made from the milk of a cow that calved early, and she sets it on the table and stands there with her hands folded. Agatha looks at the butter. It is pale and soft and smells sweet. She cuts a piece and tastes it, then nods. The daughter nods back. They do not speak. They have not spoken in weeks. The daughter leaves, and the butter is used to fry slices of bread for the Lord's breakfast. And that is the whole of their interaction until the next time. The winter deepens. The wood pile shrinks. The fires burn lower. The kitchen is cold now, even when the fire is high, because the cold has seeped into the stone and the stone will not let go. The boys sleep in their clothes, and the dog sleeps pressed against the warmest wall, and Agatha sleeps in her closet with her cloak pulled over the blanket. The pottage is thin now, stretched with more water and fewer beans, because the beans are almost gone and the barley is gone and the salt pork is down to a few strips of rind. The kitchen is surviving, but barely, and everyone knows it. But no one says it. No one says anything. The work continues. The fire is raked. The water is fetched. The bread is baked. The pottage is stirred. The day passes into night and the night into day, and the kitchen turns on its axis, slow and steady and unaware that anything is wrong. Because nothing is wrong. This is winter. This is how winter has always been. The food runs low, and the wood runs low, and the people run low, but spring comes eventually, and the garden wakes up, and the fishmonger comes more often, and the world remembers what it means to be full. The kitchen knows this. The kitchen has seen many winters. It will see more. Agatha has seen 30 winters, maybe 35, she has lost count. She will see more or she will not, and either way the kitchen will be here, and the fire will be here, and someone will be standing by the hearth with an iron hook in their hand, raking the ash, waiting for the coals to glow. The night comes down again, and the kitchen settles, and the fire breathes, and the mice scratch, and Agatha lies on her mattress with her eyes open, watching the dark. She is not thinking about anything. She is just there, present in the cold, present in the silence, present in the small space between one breath and the next. The kitchen is there too, waiting, as it always waits, for the morning that will come no matter what. And the morning comes. It always comes. The fire is raked. The water is fetched. The bread is baked. The pottage is stirred. And the kitchen turns. The cold settles into the bones of the kitchen and stays there. It is no longer a visitor that leaves when the fire grows high. It is a resident now, a permanent thing that occupies every corner and clings to every surface. The stone walls weep moisture that freezes into thin sheets of ice, and the ice cracks and falls and is swept into the fire, where it hisses and vanishes. The fire itself seems smaller than it was, though Agatha knows the fire is the same size. It is only that the cold has grown larger, and the balance between them has shifted. The well boy has given up on the well. The rope is frozen beyond use, and the bucket is a block of ice, and the fire at the base of the well only melts the surface before freezing again. He carries water from the stream instead, a quarter-mile walk each way, down the hill and through the village and back up again. The stream is not frozen solid. The current keeps it moving in the center, but the edges are thick with ice and he has to break through to reach the water. His shoes are wet by the time he gets back, and he stands by the fire with his feet in the ash, letting the heat draw the moisture out of the leather. The shoes will crack eventually, and then he will wrap them in rags, and the rags will freeze, and he will wrap more rags around them, and the cycle will continue until spring. The boy who carves the wooden lump has stopped carving. His knife is too cold to hold, and his fingers are too stiff to grip it, and the lump sits on the floor near the dog, half-shaped and forgotten. He spends his time by the fire now, sitting so close that the wool of his tunic smokes and his eyelashes curl from the heat. He does not move from that spot unless he is sent to fetch something, and when he is sent, he runs, because running is the only way to stay warm between the fire and the destination. The bread oven is the warmest place in the kitchen, and the boy who works it has become the most important person in the room. He keeps the oven fired all day now, not just for bread but for warmth, and the open door radiates heat in a way that the main hearth cannot match. The boys take turns standing in front of the oven, rotating like the spit, basking in the dry blast of heat that comes out every time the oven door is opened. Agatha does not stop them. She stands in front of the oven herself sometimes, when no one is watching, and lets the heat soak into her chest and her face and her hands. The food situation is dire. Not desperate yet, but close. The salt pork is down to the last piece, a fatty slab that Agatha is saving for the Christmas feast, though Christmas is still 2 weeks away. The salt fish is gone, eaten in thin strips boiled into the pottage until the last bone was sucked clean and thrown to the dog. The beans are gone. The barley is gone. The pickled vegetables are gone. The crock scraped clean. The vinegar poured into a bottle to be used for something else. What remains is a bag of dried peas, hard and green and wrinkled, and a small wheel of hard cheese that has not yet begun to sweat, and a basket of turnips that are starting to go soft at the ends. The turnips are the only fresh thing the kitchen has, if you can call turnips that have been in storage since October fresh. They are woody and slightly bitter, but they are food, and Agatha treats them like treasure. She cuts off the soft ends and peels the tough skin and chops the flesh into small cubes. The cubes go into the pottage with the peas and a handful of salt, and the pottage is thin and pale and tastes mostly of turnip, but it is hot, and hot is enough. The Lord has noticed that the food is changing. He has not said anything directly. The Lord rarely speaks to the kitchen directly, but the steward has come down twice in the past week with complaints. The pottage is too thin. The bread is too dark. There is no meat on the table, only turnips and peas, and the Lord's guests are beginning to talk. Agatha listens to the steward with her arms crossed and her face empty. She does not explain that the meat is gone, that the fish is gone, that the barley is gone, that the winter is only half over and there is nothing she can do about any of it. She does not explain because explanations are excuses, and excuses are not tolerated in the kitchen. The steward leaves, and Agatha goes to the pantry and looks at the shelves. The shelves are almost empty. A few pots of honey, saved for sweetening, a jar of mustard seeds, a bag of salt, a small cask of vinegar, a bundle of dried herbs, mostly sage and thyme, hanging from a hook in the ceiling, and the turnips and the peas and the cheese. That is all. That is everything. She stands in the pantry for a long time, looking at nothing. The cold in here is deeper than the cold in the kitchen, and her breath fogs in front of her face. She does not shiver. She has stopped shivering. The body adapts or it does not, and hers has adapted, pulling warmth from somewhere deep inside, burning its own fuel to keep itself alive. She will be thinner by spring. They will all be thinner, but they will be alive, or most of them will, and the ones who are not will be buried in the frozen ground, and the kitchen will continue without them. The day comes when the turnips run out. It is a Tuesday or maybe a Wednesday, and the last turnip is chopped and added to the pottage, and the pottage is nothing but peas and water and salt and a few dried herbs. The color is pale green, and the taste is thin, and the texture is like drinking warm mud. The servants eat it without comment because there is nothing else. The Lord eats it and pushes his bowl away after 3 spoonfuls, and the steward comes down to the kitchen with his face red and his voice loud, and Agatha stands there and takes it, because there is nothing else. That night, she sends Robin to the village. The village has food. Not much, but some. The peasants have been saving their own stores, hiding grain and salted meat in holes in the ground and under the floors of their huts. They will not want to share, but Robin has a way with people, a quiet persistence that wears down resistance. He takes a basket and a small bag of coins, the Lord's coins, though the Lord does not know it yet, and walks down the hill in the dark. The snow has started to fall, light and dry, and it gathers on his shoulders and in his hair. He walks slowly, because the path is slick and the dark is absolute, and he cannot afford to fall and break an ankle in weather like this. The village is dark when he arrives. The huts are low and smoky, and the doors are closed against the cold, and the only light comes from the chinks in the walls where the firelight leaks through. He knocks on the first door, and a woman opens it a crack, and he asks for food. She shakes her head and closes the door. He knocks on the second door, and an old man opens it and listens to Robin's request and shakes his head and closes the door. He knocks on the third door, and a young woman with a baby on her hip looks at him for a long time, then hands him a small sack of dried beans and a piece of smoked sausage as long as his hand. He gives her 2 coins, and she bites one to make sure it is real, and then she closes the door. Robin knocks on every door in the village. By the time he is done, his basket is full and his bag of coins is empty. He has beans and sausage and a small wheel of goat cheese and a jar of pickled eggs and a bag of coarse rye flour and a handful of dried apples and a lump of beeswax and a strip of birch bark that someone said could be boiled into something edible. He walks back up the hill through the falling snow, and the basket is heavy, and his arms ache, and he does not stop because stopping means standing still, and standing still in this cold is death. He reaches the kitchen and sets the basket on the table. Agatha looks at the contents without expression. The beans are small and dirty, mixed with bits of chaff and small stones. The sausage is dark and hard and covered with white mold. The cheese is crumbly and sour-smelling. The pickled eggs are floating in a brine that has turned cloudy. The flour is gray and smells of damp. The apples are leathery and stuck together. The beeswax is hard and yellow, and the birch bark is dry and papery. She thanks him. One word. Thanks. Then she begins to sort through the basket, separating the edible from the questionable from the things that will have to be boiled until they are safe. The sausage goes into a pot of water to soak. The mold will wash off and the soaking will soften the meat. The beans go into another pot to soak overnight. The flour is sifted through a cloth to remove the biggest bits of debris, then set aside for bread. The cheese is crumbled into a bowl and covered with vinegar to kill whatever is living in it. The eggs are drained and rinsed and put into a crock with fresh brine. The apples are chopped and added to the pottage. The beeswax and the birch bark are set aside for another day. It is not enough. It is not nearly enough. But it is something, and something is more than nothing, and the kitchen will make it last. The snow continues to fall through the night and into the next day. The yard is white and deep, and the path to the stream is lost, and the well-boy cannot get water from anywhere. Agatha melts snow in the cauldron, scooping it by the bucketful from the yard and dumping it into the pot over the fire. The snow melts down to almost nothing. A bucket of snow becomes a pot of water the size of a cup, and it takes hours to gather enough for the day's cooking. The boys take turns going outside with buckets, and they come back with their hands blue and their faces white, and they stand by the fire until the feeling returns to their fingers. The kitchen is running out of fuel for the fire. The wood pile is a small stack of logs against the wall, maybe enough for a week if they are careful, less if the cold continues. Agatha has started burning the old barrels, the ones that held salt fish and pickled vegetables. The barrels burn well, the oak wood dry and seasoned, but each barrel that burns is a barrel that cannot be used for storage next year. She burns them anyway. There is no next year if they freeze to death this year. The turnspit dog dies. It happens in the night, quietly, without fuss. One of the night boys finds it in the morning, curled up near the cold ashes of the fire, its body stiff and its eyes half open. The dog was old, and the winter was hard, and the kitchen had been feeding it less than it needed. Agatha looks at the dog for a moment, then picks it up and carries it outside. She does not bury it. The ground is frozen too hard to dig. She leaves it in the yard, and the snow covers it, and by spring it will be gone, eaten by something or dissolved into the mud. The kitchen feels emptier without the dog. Not sadder, the kitchen does not do sadness, but emptier. The wheel where the dog used to trot is silent, and the corner where it used to sleep is bare, and there is no soft panting to fill the gaps between the other sounds. The boys do not mention the dog. They have learned not to mention things that are gone. Mentioning does not bring them back. The Lord's brother-in-law arrives with a hunting party. They have been out for 3 days, chasing deer through the forest, and they come back with 2 carcasses slung across the back of a pack-horse. The meat is fresh and red and full of blood, and Agatha takes it from the huntsman without a word. The venison is a gift from God, or from the forest, or from the brother-in-law's vanity. She does not care where it came from. The meat is here, and the kitchen has meat for the first time in weeks. The deer are butchered in the yard. Robin does the work, his knife sliding through the joints with a practiced ease, separating the haunches from the back from the ribs from the scraps. The hide is pegged out on the ground to dry, and the bones are set aside for broth, and the organs are sorted into piles, heart and liver for the Lord's table, lungs and kidneys for the servants, the rest for the pigs. The meat is brought inside and hung from hooks in the ceiling, where the cold air will keep it fresh for days. The kitchen has found its purpose again. The fire is built high, and the venison is cut into chunks and browned in the fat saved from the last piece of pork. The pottage is transformed, dark and rich with meat and bone broth and the last of the dried peas. The bread is made with the gray rye flour, and it comes out of the oven dense and heavy and sour, but it is bread, and bread is life. The servants eat standing by the fire, their bowls in their hands, their faces briefly less gray than they have been. The Lord eats in the hall, and the steward does not come down to complain. The meat will not last. Agatha knows this. 2 deer, even large ones, will feed the household for maybe 2 weeks if she stretches them, maybe 3 if she makes the pottage thinner and the portions smaller. After that, the kitchen will be back where it started, with nothing but the memory of venison and the cold and the long dark months ahead. But 2 weeks is 2 weeks. 2 weeks is time. Time is the only thing that solves the problem of winter, because winter ends eventually and spring comes and the garden wakes up and the fish return to the stream and the world remembers how to feed itself. She does not think about the time after the venison is gone. She thinks about today and tomorrow and maybe the day after that. The kitchen has taught her to think in small increments, because thinking too far ahead is a luxury she cannot afford. The fire needs wood. The pottage needs stirring. The bread needs kneading. These are the thoughts that fill her mind, and they are enough. The snow stops falling. The sky clears, and the cold intensifies, and the stars come out at night like chips of ice embedded in black velvet. The kitchen is colder than it has ever been, but the venison hangs from the ceiling, and the fire burns, and the boys huddle together near the oven, and Agatha stands by the hearth with her arms crossed, watching the flames. Her face is the same as always, empty, calm, unreadable, but something behind her eyes has softened, just slightly, like a muscle that has been clenched for so long it has forgotten how to relax. The days pass, the venison shrinks, the pottage thins, the wood pile dwindles. The cold does not end. It is the same day over and over, the same fire, the same water, the same bread, the same silence. The boy who carved the wooden lump has started carving again. His fingers still stiff but moving, shaving thin curls of wood from the block that still does not look like anything. The dog is gone, but the wheel remains, empty and turning on its own when someone bumps into it. Agatha's daughter comes from the dairy again. The dairy is cold, colder than the kitchen, and the daughter's hands are cracked and bleeding from the constant work with cold water and cold milk. She brings nothing this time. She just stands in the doorway, and Agatha looks at her, and the daughter looks back, and neither of them speaks. The daughter turns and walks away, and Agatha watches her go, and then she turns back to the fire. The night comes. The kitchen settles. The fire breathes. And the winter continues, the same as always, the same as it has been and the same as it will be until something changes. But nothing changes. The kitchen turns. The pottage bubbles. The bread bakes. The water is fetched. The fire is raked. And Agatha stands by the hearth, in the smoke and the heat and the cold, and she does not move. She does not need to move. She is where she has always been, and where she will always be, and the kitchen is her shape, and she is the kitchen's, and neither one will end until the fire goes out. And the fire does not go out. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not for a long time. The coals glow in the ash, red and patient, waiting for the morning. And the morning will come. It always comes. And the kitchen will be there, and the fire will be there, and Agatha will be there, and the work will begin again. The same work. The same day. The same slow, steady, endless turning. The venison lasts longer than Agatha expected. Not because there was more of it, but because the household has grown smaller. 2 of the kitchen boys have fallen sick with a cough that rattles in their chests like stones in a wooden bowl, and they lie on their pallets by the fire, too weak to fetch or chop or stir. The Lord's chaplain has taken to his bed with the same cough, and 2 of the serving women are out of commission, and the steward moves through the halls with a cloth pressed to his face. The castle is thinning out, not from hunger but from illness, and the illness is a kind of hunger too, a hunger for warmth, for rest, for the body's own strength to return. Agatha does not get sick. She never gets sick. Or if she does not show it, and the difference between not getting sick and not showing it is not a difference that matters. She stands by the fire as always, stirring the pottage, kneading the bread, directing the remaining boys with a look or a nod. Her face is the same. Her hands are the same. Her voice, when she uses it, is the same low monotone that has not changed in 20 years. The boys who are not sick work harder to make up for the ones who are. The well boy, his name is Simon, though no one calls him that, makes twice as many trips to the stream, and his shoes have cracked beyond repair, and he wraps his feet in rags that freeze solid and thaw and freeze again. The bread oven boy has taken over the turnspit duties as well, though there is rarely anything on the spit anymore, and he spends most of his time splitting logs with a dull axe because the wood pile is down to the last few pieces of furniture that no one is using. A chair went into the fire yesterday. A small table today. Tomorrow, perhaps a chest or the frame of an old bed. The wooden lump that the small boy was carving has disappeared. No one knows where it went. Into the fire, probably, or swept into the corner and forgotten. The boy does not look for it. He sits by the fire with his knees pulled up to his chest, and his eyes are glassy, and his cough is wet and deep. He is one of the sick ones now, lying on the pallet near the warmth, and his hands are too weak to hold a knife anyway. The lump is gone, and he does not miss it. He does not miss anything. He is too tired to miss. The days are short and gray and identical. The sun, when it appears, is low and weak, and it casts long shadows that stretch across the kitchen floor like fingers reaching for something they cannot quite grasp. The firelight and the daylight mix into the same bone-colored glow, and the hours slide past without markers. No bells ring in the kitchen. No clocks tick. Time is measured in bowls of pottage and armloads of wood and the slow rise and fall of the sick boys' chests. The Lord has stopped complaining. He is sick too, though not as sick as the chaplain, and he stays in his chamber with a fire of his own and a cup of warm wine within reach. The steward brings him news from the kitchen. There is venison today, or there is not. There is bread, or there is not. And the Lord nods and waves him away. The Lord is not thinking about food. The Lord is thinking about his own breathing, about the weight on his chest, about the cough that comes and goes and comes again. The venison runs out on a Sunday, or what might be a Sunday. Agatha cuts the last piece from the haunch, a thin strip of dark meat clinging to the bone, and adds it to the pottage with the last of the dried peas and the last of the gray flour. The pottage is thick and dark and tastes of everything that has gone into it over the past weeks. Meat and beans and turnips and herbs and salt and water and the memory of other meals, other winters, other kitchens. She serves it to the healthy and the sick alike, and they eat it slowly because eating too fast makes the stomach cramp when there has not been enough food. The next day there is no meat. The next day after that, there are no peas. The pottage is water and salt and a handful of dried herbs that have lost their flavor months ago. The bread is made from the last of the gray flour, mixed with crushed acorns that Robin gathered from the forest floor, and the acorns make the bread bitter and gritty, but it is food and food is food. The Lord's table gets the same bread as the servant's table, because there is nothing else. The steward does not come down to complain. There is no point. The well boy stops going to the stream. The stream has frozen solid, all the way across, and the ice is thick enough to hold a man's weight but not thick enough to cut through for water. He melts snow again, scooping it from the yard into the cauldron, and the cauldron sits on the fire for hours, producing a small amount of water that tastes of dirt and smoke. The kitchen drinks it anyway. Thirst is thirst, and thirst does not care about taste. The fire is the only thing that matters now. The fire is the heart, the center, the reason the kitchen still exists. Without the fire, there is no heat, no cooking, no water, no life. The boys feed the fire everything they can find. The broken chair, the cracked barrel, the wooden bowl that someone dropped and split, the handle of the old rake that has been leaning against the wall for years. The fire eats it all, and the fire asks for more, and the boys go looking for more, and they find less and less. Agatha sits by the fire and watches it. She does not stir the pottage anymore because there is no pottage to stir. The cauldron is empty, wiped clean with a cloth that she then threw into the fire. The table is bare. The pantry is bare. The shelves hold nothing but dust and the memory of food. The kitchen is a cave of cold and silence, and the fire is a small island of light in the middle of it, and Agatha is the only thing moving. The boys who are not sick sit around the fire in a loose circle, their faces blank, their hands tucked into their armpits for warmth. They do not talk. There is nothing to talk about. The fire pops and settles, and the sparks fly up toward the smoke hole, and the smoke drifts out into the gray sky. The world outside is white and still. The world inside is gray and still. The only difference is the fire. The sick boys lie on their pallets and do not move. Their coughs have stopped, which is not a good sign, but no one says this out loud. The smallest boy, the one who carved the lump, has not eaten in 2 days. He is not hungry. He is not anything. His eyes are open, but he is not looking at anything. Agatha looks at him sometimes, and then she looks away. There is nothing she can do. There has never been anything she could do. The kitchen feeds people, and when it cannot feed them, they stop being people and become something else, something that the kitchen cannot help. The winter is not over. That is the worst part. The winter is not even close to over. The snow that falls and melts and falls again is the snow of January, and February is still ahead, and March is still ahead, and April is when the garden might begin to wake, if the garden wakes at all. The kitchen has survived many winters, but this one is different. This one is harder. This one is asking for something that the kitchen does not have to give. Robin goes to the village again. He takes no coins this time because there are no coins left. He takes nothing but his empty basket and his quiet persistence. He walks down the hill through the snow, and the village is even darker than before, and the doors do not open when he knocks. He knocks on every door, and every door stays closed. The villagers have nothing to give because the villagers have nothing for themselves. The winter has taken from them too, and they are huddled in their huts, burning their own furniture, eating their own last scraps. Robin stands in the middle of the village for a long time, his basket empty, his breath fogging, and then he walks back up the hill. He tells Agatha that there is nothing. She nods. She already knew. That night, the smallest boy dies. It happens quietly, like the dog. One moment he is breathing, and the next moment he is not, and the difference is so small that no one notices until the morning. Agatha finds him when she goes to stir the fire. His body is still warm from the heat of the hearth, but his face is gray, and his mouth is open, and his eyes are half closed. She looks at him for a moment. Then she covers his face with a cloth and goes back to the fire. They cannot bury him. The ground is too hard. They cannot burn him because the fire needs to save its heat for the living. So they wrap him in a blanket and carry him to the pantry, the coldest room in the kitchen, and they lay him on the floor and close the door. The cold will preserve him until the ground thaws, or until someone comes to take him away, or until the kitchen forgets he was ever there. Agatha does not think about him. She cannot afford to think about him. Thinking about the dead does not feed the living. The kitchen is smaller now. One less boy, one less mouth, one less body taking up space by the fire. The loss is not felt as grief. It is felt as a kind of lightness, a small release of pressure, a tiny adjustment in the math of survival. One less person to feed means the food lasts a little longer. One less person to warm means the fire goes a little further. The kitchen does not celebrate this. It does not mourn it. It simply continues because continuing is the only thing it knows. The days pass. The snow falls. The fire burns. The pottage, when there is pottage, is nothing but water and salt and the memory of herbs. The bread, when there is bread, is nothing but acorns and the memory of flour. The healthy boys grow thinner, and the sick boys grow stiller, and Agatha grows older in a way that has nothing to do with time. Her hair is grayer. Her face is more lined. Her hands are more cracked. But she stands by the fire with her arms crossed, and she watches the flames, and she does not move. One of the sick boys dies. Then another. 2 in the same week, or what might be a week. The second one is the boy who worked the bread oven, the one who knew the color of the bricks and the sound of the loaf when it was done. Now he is in the pantry with the smallest boy, wrapped in a blanket, waiting for the thaw. The pantry is getting crowded, but there is room. There is always room. The fire is dying. Not the flame. The flame still burns, small and orange and desperate. But the fuel. There is nothing left to burn. The furniture is gone. The barrels are gone. The broken tools are gone. The only wood left is the structural wood, the beams that hold up the roof, the planks that make the floor. Agatha looks at the beams and considers. Burning the roof means no roof. Burning the floor means no floor. But no fire means freezing, and freezing means death, and death means the roof and the floor do not matter anyway. She does not burn the beams. Not yet. She sends the boys to the forest instead, despite the wolves, despite the cold, despite the fact that the forest is deep in snow and the deadfall is buried. They go because she tells them to, and they go because there is nothing else. Simon leads the way, his feet wrapped in rags, his hands bare. The other boys follow, 3 of them, the only ones left who can walk. They walk into the forest and disappear among the white trees, and the kitchen waits for them to come back. They come back with armloads of wet wood, branches that have been buried under the snow for weeks, damp and heavy and reluctant to burn. The wood hisses and smokes and gives off more steam than heat, but it burns eventually, and the fire grows a little, and the kitchen warms a little, and the boys sit by the fire and do not speak. Their faces are white with cold and exhaustion, and their hands are bleeding from tearing branches off frozen trees. But they are alive, and the fire is alive, and the kitchen is still here. The forest becomes a daily trip. The boys go out every morning, as soon as there is enough light to see, and they come back every afternoon with armloads of wet wood. The wood is never enough. It burns quickly, the dampness eating the heat, and by morning the fire is always low, the coals barely glowing, the kitchen cold enough to see your breath. But the fire does not go out. It has not gone out since before Agatha can remember, and it will not go out now. Not if she has anything to do with it. The Lord's chaplain dies. The Lord himself is still sick but alive, and the steward is still moving, and the castle is still standing. The kitchen is still standing too, though it is not much more than a cold stone room with a small fire in the middle. The pottage pot is empty. The bread oven is cold. The pantry is full of dead boys wrapped in blankets, and the smell is starting to change, but no one mentions it. There is nothing to say. Agatha's daughter comes from the dairy. The dairy has been empty for weeks. The cows are dead, frozen in their stalls or butchered for meat, and the daughter has nowhere else to go. She stands in the doorway of the kitchen, and Agatha looks at her, and the daughter looks back. There is no butter this time, no cheese, no milk, just the daughter, thin and pale and quiet. Agatha moves aside and makes room by the fire. The daughter sits down and holds her hands out to the flames, and she does not speak, and Agatha does not speak, and the fire crackles and the snow falls and the winter continues. The days are longer now, not warmer. The cold is still deep and hard, but the light lasts a little longer, and the sun is a little higher, and the shadows are a little shorter. The change is so slow that the kitchen does not notice it at first, but then one day the snow stops falling, and the next day the sky is blue, and the next day the icicles on the edge of the roof begin to drip. The drip is small and intermittent, a single drop that falls and freezes and falls again, but it is a sign, and the kitchen knows signs. The thaw comes slowly. The stream begins to run again, a thin trickle under the melting ice, and Simon goes to the stream instead of the forest, and he comes back with water that tastes like water instead of melted snow. The ground softens, and the boys go out to the yard and dig a hole, and they carry the bodies out of the pantry and bury them in the frozen mud, and they say words that no one remembers and no one believes. The smallest boy goes into the ground. The bread oven boy goes into the ground. The others go into the ground, and the ground closes over them, and the kitchen is lighter. The garden is still dead, but the edges of the garden are showing signs of life. A few green shoots, pale and thin, pushing up through the mud. Agatha sees them when she goes out to the yard, and she stands over them for a long time, looking down. They are not food yet. They are not even close to food. But they are something, and something is more than nothing, and the something will grow, and the kitchen will be there when it does. The fire burns lower now, but not because the wood is gone. The fire burns lower because the cold is less, and the kitchen does not need as much heat. The boys bring wood from the forest, and the wood is still damp, but it burns, and the fire is steady, and the kitchen is warm enough. The pottage pot is back on the fire, and the pottage is thin and pale and made from nothing but the memory of food, but it is hot, and hot is enough. Agatha stands by the hearth with her arms crossed, watching the flames. Her daughter sits on the floor near her feet, also watching. The kitchen is quiet, not the quiet of emptiness, but the quiet of waiting. Waiting for the garden, waiting for the fish, waiting for the long winter to release its hold and let the world begin again. The light through the smoke hole is brighter now, almost white. The days are longer, and the kitchen is lighter, and the shadows are shorter, and the fire is smaller, and the pottage is thinner, and the people are thinner, and the winter is ending. Not over. Not yet. But ending. The kitchen can feel it in the way the cold does not bite quite as hard, in the way the snow melts a little faster, in the way the water from the stream tastes a little less like dirt. The kitchen has survived. It will survive. It has always survived. And Agatha stands by the fire, in the smoke and the heat and the cold, and she does not move. She does not need to move. She is where she has always been and where she will always be, and the kitchen is her shape, and she is the kitchen's, and the fire is still burning, and the fire will keep burning, and the world will keep turning, and the kitchen will keep turning with it. The same slow turn, the same low flame, The same cold well in the morning and the same tired hands at night. And nothing ever ends. It just pauses for a while and then continues the same way it has always continued, the same way it will always continue, as long as there is fire and water and someone to stir the pot. The light through the smoke hole shifts. The afternoon has become evening. The fire crackles. The pottage bubbles. The daughter shifts on the floor. The boys sit in their places. And the kitchen waits, as it has always waited, for whatever comes next. It does not know what comes next. It does not need to know. It will be ready. It is always ready.